Namaskar, warm welcome you all on this live interactive session presented by CIET NCERT. My name is Rajan Rajput and you all are connected with us through eVidya channel number 6, and beside this on our official YouTube channels NCERT Official and NCERT PM eVidya Class 6 YouTube channel. For all the viewers and students, this is a science session and topic we are going to talk about is microorganism, friends and foe part 2. So definitely what we learn in part 1 we summarize in this session also. So if you have any questions and doubt regarding this session, regarding this topic, please let us know. You can make a call to us on IVR number that is on your screen. It's 8800440559, or you can send your queries and question on our official mail ID. Note down the mail ID is dth.class6@ciet.nic.in. The viewers who are connected with us with our official YouTube channels, please go there. Live chat box option is available to put your queries and question. So let us meet our today's guest. We are joined by Ma'am Sudiksha. Ma'am is a TGT from Natural Science subject. Ma'am, namaskar. Warm welcome.
Thank you, ma'am.
So ma'am, as this is part 2, we are excited to know what we learned in part 1 of this topic.
Okay, so first of all, let me recapitulate the chapter's name for you all. It is Microorganisms, Friends and Foes. So in part 1, we had covered the multiple microorganisms that we see around us, and also how are their enemies, how they act as our enemies and how they harm us in our day-to-day lives. That is what we covered in part 1, and now since we are in part 2, we will be covering how those microorganisms act as our friends in our lives.
Yes, so time to learn how they are act like our friends. So ma'am, please, we are requesting to start our today's session.
Okay. Now since we know that microorganisms play varied roles in our lives, some of them might be as friends while some of them might be as our foes. Now to come to them as our friends, what we have is, ma'am, do you ever eat curd at home?
Yes ma'am, many times.
So do our children know that the curd that we eat is actually made by bacteria? Now one would say that bacteria is actually a microorganism, and in the last session we had seen that they are our foes, but here we have a proof that microorganisms can be our friends as well. So the bacteria lactobacillus is actually our friend, which helps to make curd, and the curd obviously is very healthy for all of us. Then another thing, we all eat bread as well.
Right.
And in last session we had read about a microorganism called yeast. That yeast is used to make curd, because the bread that we eat, it's very fluffy.
Right.
The fluffiness of the bread is caused by that bacteria, the microorganism yeast. So these are the two ways in which we are actually beginning with it. These are the very edible microorganisms that we eat, because definitely the curd that we are eating, we are also eating the lactobacillus bacteria along with it. So these microorganisms are our friends. They are helpful for us and we even intake them. Okay. In the last session, I had given one small sentence about an algae which is even taken in by astronauts for their protein. Now I have come across the pictures and I have put the pictures in the PPT as well. In the last session, I had talked about cholera and spirulina as well. Now these are the two algae which are intaken by astronauts for their protein intake. They are very rich in protein and also they are very light in weight. Definitely astronauts need to carry food which are very light in weight, since they are going to space, and they need high protein content for themselves.
Right.
So these are the two algae which they use in space to complete their protein intake.
So definitely there is a commercial use of these organisms.
Definitely ma'am. That is our next topic which we are coming to.
Okay.
Commercial use of microorganisms. Now we know that alcohol, wine and acetic acid, which in our day-to-day lives we call as vinegar, or in Hindi we call it sirka. Okay. Now that is what is made by microorganisms, and there is a very tiny process which is taken into consideration in this act. That process is known as fermentation. What happens in fermentation? The sugars are converted into alcohol. This fermentation is also used in the process where we eat chole bhature. So the bhaturas that are made, वहाँ पर भी fermentation का process use होता है. So this is
eating soda, eatable soda, जो हम अपने घरों में भी इस्तेमाल करते हैं, it is the face of that microorganism too.
Yeah, somewhat you'll say that it is actually a sort of a byproduct of that microorganism. Okay, so these are some of the commercial uses, and also pickles that we eat. हम अचार खाते हैं सब. That is also made by the process of fermentation.
Yes.
Okay. Now, ma'am, have you ever heard about any medicine, any sort of medicines that we have?
Yes, many times. और क्या माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिजम्स का इस्तेमाल मेडिकल यूज़ में भी होता है?
Yes, definitely. Now, बहुत एक common term, and there's a very common term which we call antibiotics. Okay, so there are certain medicines which are antibiotics. What they are is they are actually microorganisms only. Which can kill other microorganisms. Like antibiotics are those microorganisms which can kill bacteria in our body. Like if we are having fever and then we are taking medicine, so that medicine is used to kill that microorganism.
Like we are taking vaccination.
Yes, definitely. Vaccination is also something. We'll come to vaccination as well. But I'd like to state one very tiny thing, that the common cold that we have, हमें जुकाम होता है,
जी.
that is caused because of a virus. Okay, but at times what people do is they go to the store and they take an antibiotic. So can it be possible that a disease is being caused by a virus, but we are taking medicine to kill a bacteria? Can that heal us?
Yes.
No, ma'am, actually not. In fact, our students might also get confused at times, because if a problem is being caused by a virus, so we need to take a medicine which can kill the virus, right? If virus is causing the problem and we are taking the medicine to kill a bacteria, it will not do any harm to the virus.
Wow, that's a really interesting fact. One of them. Yes.
So we should, in our common colds, we should never ever take those over the counter antibiotics. We can always go for home remedies, or we can take steams. We can let our own body heal itself. But rather than taking medicines every time, it's not very helpful for us.
And without doctor's consultant?
Definitely, that is one of the major things that we should consider always.
Yes.
Okay, now here we are talking about penicillin. Penicillin is a very tiny topic. Now we had talked about antibiotics. Penicillin is also an antibiotic, and it was discovered by Alexander Fleming by accident. It was not actually what he meant to do, but he just discovered it by some accident. So there is not much to it. It's just used as an antibiotic to kill bacteria. Okay, ma'am had come across vaccines. So ma'am, what all vaccines have we heard in our recent lives?
Yes, COVID-19 vaccine and polio drops as well.
Yes, definitely. So COVID we had seen, the COVID vaccine or the Covaxin that we had seen, and the polio vaccine as well. Now let me first just give you a gist what a vaccine actually does to our body. Vaccine is actually weakened microbes. Like if some microbes is causing some disease in our body, the same microbe but in a weakened form is administered in our body. It is given in our body so that our body can prepare for the bigger disease that is coming up. Our body can make up antibodies for that. So what happens if like we all have experienced, when we got the COVID vaccine, everybody got some amount of fever,
right,
for a day or so, right? So what had happened, they had given the COVID virus in our body but in a weakened form. So what it did, though it gave us fever, but it made our body ready for the upcoming virus that we could encounter.
Right.
So it was basically making our body ready. That is what every vaccine does. It makes our body ready for the bigger problem that is coming. So we can be prepared and we can fight it off. So that is what a vaccine does.
जी.
And as for what we said, polio vaccine, we know that polio drops are administered to small kids.
Yeah, that this is a type of oral vaccine.
Yes, definitely, because most of the vaccines we see that injected into our body like the COVID vaccine was. But here this is a type of oral vaccine which is dropped into the mouth of the child. Okay. Now we have some other functions or we have some other benefits of microorganisms as well. One of them is increasing soil fertility.
Okay.
Yeah. Now since we know that the soil has ample amount of microorganisms, definitely if it did not have microorganisms, no parent would have any objection to the child eating sand.
Yes.
Because definitely no parent allows that. That is because the soil is very rich in microorganisms. Okay. and those microorganisms, what they are doing, they are increasing the fertility of the soil. What they are doing is, they are taking nutrients from around, they are breaking down the nutrients and mixing it into the soil, so that any crop, any tree or any plant which is growing in that region, it might get all the nutrients and grow fully.
So is this really safe to take a soil as a kit?
No ma'am, it's actually not safe, because there are many microorganisms there and you never know which might harm our body.
Right.
They might be useful in the sand, but or for the plants, but they are not for us.
Yes.
Okay. Now, one very important thing that it does, they clean the environment. What we see is, when any leaf has fallen off a tree, if we leave the leaf for there for some time, we'll see after certain weeks the leaf has disappeared.
Yes.
It has been converted into mud or something, right? Like we see compost as well.
Yes.
In gardens, we see big dug up areas, the peels of vegetables and fruits, they are all put into it and it is covered. Okay, after a month or so, when we look at it, we see that it has all become soil and humus that we call. That is all done by microorganisms only.
So that's why we are know that अभी जैसे हम देखते हैं कि 2 डस्टबिन्स क्रिएट कर दिए जाते हैं, दैट ग्रीन वन एंड ब्लू वन. और ग्रीन वन में जो है हम अपना इस टाइप का जैसे वेजिटेबल की बात कर रहे हैं, आप अपने सड़े गले फ्रूट्स और लीव्स वगैरह जो है उसमें थ्रो करते रहते हैं, सो वो बाद में रीयूजेबल हो जाता है.
The biodegradable one basically.
Yes.
They can be degraded or broken down by microorganisms.
Right.
Yeah, so those are the ones which can be broken down by microorganism, and what the microorganism does is, like if we eat a banana and we throw it off, okay, so the peel of the banana also has some nutrients.
Yes.
So what the microorganism does is that it breaks down that banana peel and it takes all the nutrients and mixes it into the soil. So now if the nutrients are into the soil, it can be used up by the plants.
Yes, definitely.
So those microorganisms which clean up the environment and break down the heavier material and into simpler things so that it can be used, they are known as decomposers.
Okay, so this is the better step to take our environment clean.
Yeah, definitely composts are very important. So I guess if students, they have any park near around or they have a small garden in their home as well, they can also practice this, they can also have this practice of making compost.
Right.
Yes. Okay, so there is a small chart that we have about compost. Okay, there was a tree and there was an apple. When we eat the apple, we throw it off, and there is a green dustbin. Please remember children, the green one is for biodegradable waste. Now the green one, we put it into the soil, we mix it, and after some time it turns into humus. That humus can be then used to plant trees. Okay, then our next topic is the nitrogen cycle, which will be our last topic for this session. The nitrogen cycle is actually a very important cycle. Now I would just like to give you a gist before. I have brought pulses here and pea here. I have a pea pod and the seed of pea as well. Now what we are looking at here is, there are 2 things which are rich in protein. Okay. Now we all know that protein is required for our body in a balanced diet. Generally we say that we should eat green vegetables, we should eat pulses. So this is the examples that we have brought here. Now what we got to know is that why are these rich in protein and why not all the other vegetables rich in protein. What happens is, when the pea grows, the plant is there, every plant has roots. In the roots of a pea plant, there are very tiny, in simple words you could say pimple like structures which we call rhizomes. In those rhizomes, there are microorganisms. Those microorganisms take up nitrogen from the environment and make it into simpler form so that the plant could use it. And then what happens when the plant uses that nitrogen is used to make protein. And when that protein is made, definitely it goes into the lentils and the pulses and also the pea plant.
Okay.
So this is our nitrogen cycle, that the microorganisms take up the nitrogen from the environment, from the soil, and mixes it into the soil in simpler forms, which is then used in making protein, and it is added to these seeds that we are eating, the pea and the pulses. Now when they are taken by us, we defecate, we release our waste and that is mixed into the soil. Again then nitrogen goes into the soil.
Yes, so back to the topic what we learn in today's session. We are again इसको हम revise कर लेते हैं.
Yes, definitely. Microorganism, as we said, there are friends. Well, first we saw the edible microorganisms. First was the lactobacillus ones, which make up curd. Then there were yeast, which help in making bread. Then we came up to the commercial use of the microorganisms, where we saw that alcohol, wine and vinegar is made by the process of fermentation, which is occurred or which is done by microorganisms. Then we came to the medicinal uses, where we saw the vaccine, where we saw the antibiotics. Okay, and then we came up to increasing soil fertility. There are many that how the microorganisms help to increase the soil fertility and help the plants to grow. Then we came to cleaning the environment, how the decomposers, the microorganisms which are decomposers, how they change everything and make it into simpler forms. Last, our topic was the nitrogen cycle, that how the protein rich plants make up the protein and how nitrogen is used from the environment.
जी मैम, आपने कमर्शियल यूज़ की भी बात की कि माइक्रो ऑर्गेनिजम्स का हम कमर्शियल यूज़ करते हैं. सो एक बार इस टॉपिक को भी हम अपने बच्चों के लिए रिवाइज कर लेते हैं, एज दिस इज द मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट क्वेश्चन आई थिंक फ्रॉम द चैप्टर.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so for this topic, we'll first go on to the definition of fermentation. What fermentation is? Whatever we are eating, okay, everything has sugar. Like we are eating chapati, we are eating rice, everything has sugar. The wheat we are eating, गेहूं की रोटी खाते हैं, ठीक है, all that has sugar. Okay. Now what that sugar does is, if we release microorganisms onto the wheat, बहुत सारा गेहूं है, ठीक है, वहाँ पर अगर हम माइक्रोब्स रिलीज कर देते हैं, so what the microbes do is, धीरे धीरे आप देखेंगे कि गेहूं अगर बहुत टाइम तक रखा रहता है, it starts smelling, it starts stinking, it starts smelling very funny. Okay, what it actually doing or what the microbes are actually doing it, they are decomposing the sugars in the wheat and turning it into alcohol. That is what they are doing, and that process is known as fermentation. So when the wheat is reduced from sugar to alcohol, when it's converted, now that alcohol can be used in wines, in actual alcohols that we have, or in the vinegar or the sirka that we call, it can be used in that way.
सो मैम, इसी वजह से क्या जैसे हम अचार या फिर जैम वगैरह प्रिपेयर करते हैं, ये बहुत लॉन्ग टाइम तक जो है स्टे कर पाते हैं.
Yes, अचार का that happens, definitely that happens that way. And in fermentation I had also talked about that हम भटूरे खाते हैं. Okay, so what happens is the dough that we prepare, that also has sugar. Okay, and it has microorganisms like yeast in it. What happens is that yeast is converting those sugars into alcohol and carbon dioxide. So आप देखते हैं जब भी कभी वो डो प्रिपेयर होके काफ़ी वो आप देखते हैं वो स्वेल हो जाता है, लाइक ओके इट बिकम्स वेरी फ्लफी. दैट इज बिकॉज ऑफ द कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड. But what is also happening? Alcohol is also being prepared. So if we leave it for a longer period of time, we'll see there's a very tangy flavor to the bhaturas. वो थोड़े खट्टे हो जाते हैं. That is because more amount of alcohol has been produced. So there is a very limited time period for which we need to keep the dough to set and for it to get fluffy. So that is what is happening here.
So what are the other uses of microorganisms, ma'am?
Okay. Just let me tell you one thing, that we should remember the name of the scientist that had discovered the process of fermentation. That is Louis Pasteur, because that is also a very important question from this chapter, that who had discovered the process of fermentation. So that is Louis Pasteur for us. And now that we have antibiotics, we were talking about antibiotics, definitely. Antibiotics, we have very many over the counter or over the we have fungal infections for which we have mostly antifungal tubes are given. Okay, there are no medicines for it as such. It is mostly in liquid form or maybe in some ointment form.
Yes.
Whereas in antibiotics we have mostly tablets, and they are very rare medicines which can kill the viruses.
So definitely, like I found this is a very interesting topic we learned today, and I'm sure you are also feel like that, and for that मैम सुदीक्षा आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद करना चाहेंगे. मैम TGT साइंस है, नेचुरल साइंस सब्जेक्ट की. मैम आपने इस सत्र में हमें बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट और इंटरेस्टिंग फैक्ट्स के साथ जो है जानकारी दी, इसके लिए आपका धन्यवाद करना चाहेंगे. थैंक यू सो मच मैम. सो यहाँ पर आप सभी को बताना चाहेंगे कि CIET NCERT आपके लिए अपने ऐसे ही बेहतरीन लाइव सत्र लेकर आता रहेगा. लेकिन यहाँ परीक्षा पे चर्चा की बात होनी चाहिए और ये बात हमारे बीच है और बहुत आप सभी को जान के इस बात को लेकर बहुत खुशी भी है, उत्सुकता भी है आप सभी दर्शकों के बीच में। और हमें उम्मीद है कि आपने माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी के साथ परीक्षा पे चर्चा 2025 का आनंद लिया। हमें ये घोषणा करते हुए खुशी हो रही है कि इस वर्ष का संस्करण 7 आगामी एपिसोड्स के साथ एक नया परिप्रेक्ष्य लेकर आएगा, जिसमें विभिन्न क्षेत्रों के प्रतिष्ठित व्यक्तित्व शामिल होंगे। इन सत्रों में मानसिक स्वास्थ्य, प्रौद्योगिकी और वित्त, पोषण और आपके ब्रेन डेवलपमेंट के साथ साथ अन्य विषयों पर भी बातचीत को शामिल किया जाएगा। साथ ही इसका उद्देश्य बच्चों को सिखाने और व्यक्तिगत विकास को लेकर उनकी यात्रा में मार्गदर्शन करना भी होगा। तो आप ये वीडियो देखिए।
परीक्षा पे चर्चा के 8th एडिशन के नए अंदाज में हो चुकी है शुरुआत। प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी ने स्टूडेंट्स को दिए एग्जाम और लाइफ से जुड़े वैल्यूएबल टिप्स। आगे इस चर्चा से जुड़ेंगे अलग अलग फील्ड्स के एक्सपर्ट्स जैसे दीपिका पादुकोण, मैरी कॉम, फूड फार्मर, सदगुरु इत्यादि, जो 7 नए एपिसोड्स में एडवाइस देंगे मेंटल हेल्थ, न्यूट्रिशन एंड वेलबींग के बारे में। तो देखना ना भूलें 12 फरवरी से रोज सुबह 10 बजे डीडी न्यूज और नरेंद्र मोदी यूट्यूब चैनल पर।
तो आप सभी 12 से 25 जनवरी 2025 तक ज़रूर ट्यून इन करें और देखें सुबह 10 बजे दूरदर्शन चैनल्स पर लाइव। और साथ ही चाहेंगे कि आप इस अमूल्य जानकारी को इकट्ठा करें और बिल्कुल इस प्रोग्राम का हिस्सा बनना ना भूलें। परीक्षा पे चर्चा का आप हिस्सा बनेंगे, साथ ही उम्मीद है कि आप हमारे अन्य सत्रों का भी हिस्सा बनेंगे। CIET NCERT आपके लिए अपना अगला लाइव सत्र लेकर बस कुछ ही मिनटों में कनेक्ट होगा। ये सत्र होगा 3:30 पर। विषय बता दें आप सभी को, विषय होगा फ्रैक्शन पार्ट 1, मैथमेटिक्स का विषय होगा कक्षा 6 के बच्चों के लिए। 4 बजे का समय रहेगा ऑनलाइन प्रशिक्षण सत्र का। इसे चैनल नंबर 6 से चैनल नंबर 12 तक के सभी चैनल्स पर प्रसारित किया जाएगा। डिजिटल डिटॉक्स, प्रौद्योगिकी की लत से मुक्ति विषय होगा। 5 बजे आज सहयोग सत्र में बात होगी सेल्फ एफिकेसी एंड एग्ज़ाम प्रिपरेशंस को लेकर। साइंस के इस सत्र में हमने बहुत कुछ नया जाना। आप इस गतिविधि को, इस पाठ से जुड़ी अन्य बातों को ज़रूर दोहराइएगा। CIET NCERT के विभिन्न माध्यमों से जुड़े रहिएगा। मैं सृजन चाहूँगी अनुमति। नमस्कार।